poor single dad gave his last few dollars to a shivering old woman, unaware she was the secret billionaire owner of the city's most exclusive designer store. "Sir, you cannot possibly afford to even breathe the air in here." The pounding rain hammered against the vast, ornate windows of the Elysian, a store whose very name promised a heaven Liam could only dream of. It was a relentless, desperate sound, 1,000 tiny fists beating against the glass, mirroring the wild thudding in his own chest. Inside, the sterile silence of polished marble floors and hushed reverence for wealth felt heavier than any storm, a suffocating blanket of inadequacy. Liam stood just inside the cavernous, gleaming entrance, his worn, threadbare coat dripping a small, apologetic puddle onto the pristine white stone, each drop a testament to his intrusion. He felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes, sharp and judgmental, dissecting his very presence. He was a ghost at the feast, a smudge of gray in a world of impossible, brilliant color. He froze. His state of quiet, dignified desperation had become the very fabric of his existence since Sarah, his wife, had been stolen from him by a swift and cruel illness 2 years prior. The medical bills had been a tidal wave, sweeping away their meager savings, their small but happy home, and finally, his hope. Now, all he had left was their daughter, 7-year-old Lily, a fragile, golden-haired angel with eyes that held her mother's warmth and a cough that echoed the chill of their tiny, drafty apartment. He was haunted by the memory of Sarah's last days, her hand, brittle and pale, clutching his as she made him promise to always keep Lily safe, to always show her the beauty in the world, even when all he could see was darkness. It was a sacred promise he intended to keep, even if it shattered him. Every morning, he would look at the small, framed photo by their bedside, the last one taken of the 3 of them, and find the strength to face another day of hollow-hearted resolve. His life had become a series of impossible choices: medicine or food, a warm coat for Lily or repairing the leak in the roof. He always chose her. Lily didn't ask for much. Her world was small, but her heart was vast. Yet, for the past month, one singular, innocent desire had taken root in her mind. On their long walks to the free clinic, they always passed the Elysian. In its main display window, bathed in a soft, golden glow, sat a doll. It wasn't just any doll. It was the Starlight Princess, with a dress that shimmered like captured moonlight and eyes the color of a summer sky. Lily would press her small nose against the cold glass, her breath fogging a little circle, and whisper, "She's waiting for a forever home, Daddy." The doll became a symbol of a life he couldn't provide, a world of warmth and magic just beyond a pane of impenetrable glass. The price tag, discreetly placed on a velvet cushion, was more than he made in 3 brutal months of odd jobs. It was an unbearable truth. But today was Lily's birthday, and the thought of her waking up to nothing but a plate of thin oatmeal and his own sad eyes was a pain too raw to endure. So he had come here, with the last $74 he had in the world, tucked into a worn envelope, to do the only thing he could. He was going to ask if they had a layaway plan. He was going to beg. He took a steadying breath, the air inside the store smelling of leather and expensive perfume, a scent so alien it made his head spin. He ignored the disdainful glare from a woman in a crisp suit standing behind a gleaming counter and focused on his mission. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He just had to ask. For Lily. As he took a hesitant step forward, the ornate glass doors swished open again, admitting a gust of wind and a small, stooped figure. It was an old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her coat as thin and worn as his own. She clutched a brown paper bag of what looked like groceries, her knuckles white and trembling from the biting cold. As she shuffled past him, her foot caught on the edge of a plush rug. She faltered. The bag slipped from her grasp, and with a soft, tearing sound, it split open. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a single, sad-looking apple tumbled across the polished marble floor. A collective, quiet gasp echoed through the store. The woman stared at the mess, her shoulders slumping in utter defeat, her pale face crumbling. A tear glistened on her wrinkled cheek. Liam didn't think. He was moving before the apple had even stopped rolling. He knelt on the cold floor, his own desperation momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of pure, selfless empathy. "It's all right," he said, his voice gentle. "We'll have this cleaned up in a moment." He carefully picked up the loaf of bread, brushing off a speck of dust. He saw that the milk carton had split, a white puddle slowly spreading across the floor. It was a small tragedy, but in this temple of perfection, it felt like a seismic event. The woman just stood there, trembling, muttering, "My dinner." That was my dinner. Her voice was brittle, fragile, and it splintered something inside Liam's chest. The store manager, a woman with a severe haircut and a name tag that read Beatrice, strode towards them, her heels clicking in impatient, angry rhythm. Her lips were a thin, unforgiving line. "What is the meaning of this? This is a place of business, not a shelter." Her eyes flickered over the old woman and then settled on Liam, her gaze dripping with contempt. The message was clear. They were both stains on her perfect, gleaming world. Liam ignored her. He looked at the old woman, whose eyes were now hollow with despair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the worn envelope. The $74. Lily's birthday hope. He looked from the money to the woman's shattered expression. He thought of Lily's cough, of the empty cupboards at home. A moment of internal hesitation, a war between his promise to his daughter and the raw, immediate need in front of him. But then he looked into the stranger's eyes and saw a reflection of his own deepest fears. Loneliness, hunger, invisibility. His inherent goodness won. He knew what Sarah would have wanted him to do. He opened the envelope, took out the crisp bills, and gently pressed them into the old woman's trembling hand. "Here," he whispered, his voice sincere. "Please buy yourself a proper dinner." A hot 1 inch. The woman stared at the money, then at him, her mouth opening and closing silently. She was in a state of stunned silence, her eyes searching his as if seeing a ghost. The impact of the gesture was profound, a ripple spreading through the frozen landscape of her face. She finally found her voice, a raw whisper. "But you, don't worry about me," he said, giving her a small, weary smile. He helped her to her feet, his touch steady and unflinching. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this simple, selfless act, would change everything. He gave one last, longing glance towards the doll in the window, a silent apology to his daughter, and turned to leave. He vanished back into the pounding rain. The old woman, Serafina Blackwood, owner of the Elysian and CEO of a global fashion empire, stood perfectly still, the crisp bills clutched in her hand like a sacred relic. The money felt warmer than any fur coat, more valuable than any diamond in her vault. She watched the man disappear into the gray curtain of rain, his shoulders slumped but his stride dignified. For the first time in 20 years, since the day a sleek black car had stolen her husband and 6-year-old son from the world, she felt something other than the biting cold of grief. A small, tender warmth began to spread through her chest, a feeling so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. It was hope. Beatrice, the manager, approached her, her face a mask of false concern. "Ma'am, are you all right? Shall I have security remove you?" "That man, he shouldn't have bothered you." Serafina turned her gaze to Beatrice, and for the first time that day, the hollow, disguised look in her eyes vanished, replaced by the commanding, ice-cold clarity of a billionaire. Beatrice physically recoiled. "No," Serafina said, her voice quiet but ringing with unspoken power. "That won't be necessary." She turned to her head of security, who had been watching from a discreet distance, always aware of her presence during these strange, anonymous excursions into the world. "Find him," she commanded, her voice cracking with an emotion she couldn't name. "I want to know everything about that man." The security chief simply nodded. He understood. A seismic shift had just occurred. Liam walked home, the rain soaking through his threadbare coat until it felt like a second, icy skin. The $74 were gone. The doll was an impossible dream again. He had failed. A wave of despair, cold and heavy, washed over him. He had missed the interview he was supposed to be at, a potential job as a night shift janitor that would have at least put food on the table. He had given away his last dollar to a stranger. He winced, clenching his fists in his empty pockets. What kind of father was he? He arrived at their small apartment building, the paint peeling and the air in the hallway thick with the smell of damp and boiled cabbage. He quietly opened the door to their one-room home. A single lamp with a flickering light cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. Lily was asleep on the lumpy sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket, her favorite worn teddy bear clutched to her chest. A soft cough escaped her lips even in sleep. His heart splintered. He had chosen a stranger's dinner over his own child's birthday. The weight of his choice was unbearable. He sat in the room's only chair, the springs groaning in protest, and watched his daughter sleep, the silence of the room broken only by the relentless hammering of the rain and the sound of his own shattering heart. He felt utterly alone. Meanwhile, in a stately, ornate office high above the city, Serafina sat behind a vast, polished desk. The report from her security chief lay open before her. Liam Miller, widower, father to Lily Miller, age 7. Drowning in medical debt. Unemployed. The details were stark. A brutal summary of a life lived on the edge of a cliff. A photograph showed him holding his daughter's hand, a gentle, sad smile on his face. Serafina's chest tightened. She saw in him a purity she thought no longer existed in her transactional world. His selfless kindness was a beacon in the heavy fog of her cynicism. It had reawakened her heart, giving her a new, undeniable purpose. She would not simply repay him. That was too easy, too transactional. She would restore him. She would become his hidden savior, a quiet force of grace in his life, just as he had been in hers. The grief that had held her captive for 2 decades began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of awe and a quiet resolve. Her journey from grief to renewed purpose had begun, and it started with a single anonymous act. The next morning, Liam woke to a soft knock on his apartment door. He opened it to find 2 large paper bags filled with groceries on his doorstep. Fresh milk, bread, eggs, fruit, and even a small roast chicken still warm. Tucked into the bag was a small bottle of children's cough syrup and a box of Lily's favorite cereal. There was no one in the hallway. Taped to the milk carton was a simple handwritten note. It read, "Kindness should be rewarded. Keep fighting." Liam stood in the doorway, stunned, the aroma of warm food filling his small, cold apartment. He looked up and down the empty hall, his heart thudding wildly. Who could have done this? It felt like a miracle, a golden glow in the grayness of his life. That afternoon, another miracle. A crisp envelope was slipped under his door. Inside was enough cash to cover their rent for the next 2 months, with a note attached, typed this time. A gift from someone who believes in second chances. Liam sank into his chair, the money trembling in his hands. He felt a profound sense of disbelief, a fragile hope taking root in the barren soil of his despair. He didn't know who was doing this, but for the first time in a long time he felt seen. He felt like he wasn't fighting alone. He was unaware that from a sleek black car parked across the street, Serafina watched him through the window, a tender, unfamiliar smile gracing her lips. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the secret interventions continued. A new, warm winter coat for Lily appeared in a box outside their door. An anonymous donor paid off a significant chunk of his late wife's medical debt, a fact he learned from a bewildered but happy collections agent on the phone. Each act was a carefully placed stone, building a bridge for him to walk from desperation to stability. Liam's life began to change. The hollow look in his eyes was slowly replaced by a steady light. The apartment was warmer, the cupboards were full, and Lily's cough had vanished, replaced by her bright, innocent laughter. He'd even found a decent part-time job at a local library, a quiet, dignified place that suited his gentle nature. With the money from the anonymous gifts and his new wages carefully saved, he had finally accumulated enough to do the one thing he had dreamed of for months. He had enough to buy the Starlight Princess. He walked back into the Elysian, but this time he was different. He wore a clean, simple jacket. His posture was straight, and the desperate, haunted look was gone. The store was just as intimidating, just as gleaming and polished, but he no longer felt like an intruder. He walked with a quiet purpose. The doll was still in the window, bathed in its amber hue. He approached a sales associate, a young woman with a kind smile, and asked to purchase it. As she went to retrieve one from the stockroom, Liam's eyes wandered around the store. He saw a woman standing near the children's section, her back to him. She was tall and elegant, dressed in an impeccable gray suit, her silver hair coiled in a stately bun. She was looking at a small, ornate silver baby rattle on a velvet display, her expression unreadable. Something about her posture, a familiar sort of sadness, drew him in. He felt an unspoken pull, a strange sense of connection. He walked over, his footsteps soft on the marble. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said quietly, more to himself than to her. The woman turned, and Liam felt a jolt. He didn't recognize her as the old woman from that rainy day. Her entire bearing was different, commanding and powerful. But her eyes held the same deep, ancient sadness he had seen before. She was Serafina, but he saw only a stranger, another soul lost in memory. "Yes," she replied, her voice smooth and rich, though tinged with a raw melancholy. "It was my son's favorite." He loved the sound it made. Liam's heart went out to her. He knew that specific tense. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice sincere. "I lost my wife. The first year is unbearable." Serafina looked at him, truly looked at him, and her carefully constructed composure faltered. Here he was, the man who had saved her, offering her comfort, completely unaware of who she was. "It's been 20 years for me," she confessed, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "My son, Thomas, and my husband, Richard."
À car accident.
The pain, it doesn't go away. It just finds new places to hide. They stood in the sterile silence of the luxury store, two strangers forging a bond over the sacred ground of shared grief. It was a confession scene played out not in a dimly lit room, but under the bright, unforgiving lights of commerce, which somehow made it all the more tender. "I understand," Liam said, his gaze unwavering. "Sometimes I think I see my Sarah in a crowd, or I'll hear a laugh that sounds like hers, and for a second, my whole world stops. But then I look at my daughter, Lily, and I see her mother's smile. It's how I know she's not really gone." He spoke of Lily, of her resilience and her light, and Serafina listened with an intensity that made him feel truly seen. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She just listened, her steady eyes a safe harbor for his pain. In turn, he listened as she spoke of Thomas, a boy who loved building blocks and had a quiet chuckle just like his father. It was a cathartic exchange, an unspoken understanding passing between two shattered hearts. The sales associate returned with the doll in a beautiful, ornate box. Liam paid for it with his saved money, a receipt of his hard-won progress clutched in his hand. As he turned to leave, he looked back at the elegant woman. "Thank you," he said, not sure for what. "For listening." "No," Serafina replied, her voice thick with an emotion she could no longer hide. "Thank you." He gave her a small nod and walked away, unaware that the powerful CEO of the Elysian was watching him go, tears glistening in her eyes. The connection was undeniable. She knew she could no longer remain a hidden savior. The time for quiet observation was over. The very next day, Liam received a phone call. It was from the Elysian. There had been a mix-up with the doll he'd purchased. A newer, deluxe edition had just arrived, and they wanted to offer him an exchange, free of charge. They insisted he come in person. Liam was hesitant, but the offer was too generous to refuse. He returned to the store, the box doll in hand. The moment he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. The atmosphere was tense. The manager, Beatrice, stood near the entrance, her arms crossed, a cruel smirk on her face. Standing beside her was a severe-looking older woman, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of cold, hard wealth. Liam's blood ran cold. It was Eleanor Vance, his late wife's mother. A woman who had always despised him for not being wealthy enough for her daughter and who blamed him for Sarah's death. She was the personification of cruelty, the perfect foil for this moment. "I knew it," Eleanor hissed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I told you, Beatrice. A thief and a grifter. He probably stole the money to buy that doll in the first place." The public humiliation began. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Sir, we have reason to believe you acquired the funds for your purchase through illicit means. Furthermore, your very presence here yesterday made one of our most valued clients," she gestured to Eleanor, "feel deeply uncomfortable. You do not belong here." The few customers nearby stopped to stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Liam stood frozen, the doll clutched in his hands, his face pale. He was dignified, but the sheer force of their hatred was overwhelming. He tried to speak, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. He felt small, exposed, just as he had on that first day. The biting cold of fear seeped into his bones. I saved that money," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Saved it from what? Picking pockets? My daughter deserved a palace, and you gave her a hovel. You let her die because you were too proud and too poor to get her the best care. And now you're trying to buy my granddaughter's affection with stolen goods." Each word was a physical blow. Liam's shoulders slumped. He felt the last of his hard-won hope beginning to crumble. Just as Beatrice was about to call for security, a calm, commanding voice cut through the tension like a diamond blade through glass. "That is quite enough, Beatrice." The salvation scene had begun. Serafina Blackwood stepped out from a back office, her presence instantly changing the entire dynamic of the room. She was no longer the sad stranger from the day before, nor the frail old woman from weeks ago. She was a queen in her castle, her gaze sharp and unwavering, her power an almost tangible force. She walked slowly, deliberately, towards the unfolding drama, her impeccable suit a stark contrast to Liam's simple clothes. Total silence fell over the store. Beatrice and Eleanor froze, their mouths agape. Serafina stopped directly in front of Liam, placing herself between him and his accusers. She didn't look at them. She looked only at Liam, her eyes filled with a soft, protective light. Then, she turned her gaze upon Beatrice, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I will not have a good man slandered in my establishment," Serafina began, her voice a low, dangerous hum. Her monologue was powerful, delivered with the weight of absolute authority. "You speak of value, Beatrice. You judge a man by the thread of his coat and the weight of his wallet. But you know nothing of true worth. True worth is not in what a man has, but in what he is willing to give." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Weeks ago, I came into this store disguised as a poor, hungry old woman. I was scared and alone. You, Beatrice, looked at me with disgust. You, Eleanor, would have stepped over me without a second thought. But this man," she turned and placed a gentle hand on Liam's arm. "This man, who had nothing, knelt on this very floor. He helped me. He protected me from your judgment. And then he gave me his last $74, money he was saving for his daughter's birthday, so that a complete stranger could have a hot meal." A collective gasp went through the room. The power dynamic had been completely, seismically reversed. Beatrice's face was ashen. Eleanor was speechless. Serafina's voice rose, filled with a righteous fire. "This man's character is worth more than every item in this store combined. His heart holds a value you couldn't calculate in 1,000 lifetimes. He is not a thief. He is a hero." She then delivered the final blow, her eyes locking onto the stunned manager. "And you, Beatrice, are a disgrace to the name Elysian. You are fired. Effective immediately. Have security escort you from the premises." Beatrice sputtered, her face a mask of disbelief and rage, but the 2 security guards were already moving towards her. Serafina then turned to the equally stunned Eleanor. "And as for you, Madame Vance, your account with this establishment is permanently closed. I suggest you leave before I decide to have a conversation with the board of the charity you run." About your character, Eleanor, for the first time in her life, looked utterly defeated. She turned and fled the store without another word. Serafina had not only saved Liam, she had publicly vindicated him, restoring his dignity with a grand, heroic defense. The resolution had begun. The store was silent, the remaining customers and staff watching in awe. Serafina turned back to Liam, her expression softening into one of profound tenderness. "Liam Miller," she said, her voice now gentle. "I believe we have a great deal to discuss." She led him away from the gawking crowd, up a private, ornate staircase to her personal office. The room was cavernous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace, casting a golden glow over the plush furnishings. It was a world away from the cold, sterile store below. She gestured for him to sit on a soft leather sofa and poured him a cup of hot tea, her movements graceful and calm. For a few moments, they sat in comfortable silence, the only sound the soft click of the porcelain cup against its saucer. Liam's mind was reeling. The old woman, the elegant stranger, the billionaire owner. They were all the same person. He was in a state of profound disbelief. "You're the one," he finally whispered, the pieces falling into place. "The groceries, the rent. It was all you." Serafina nodded, a small, sad smile on her lips. "Your act of kindness that day, it did more than just buy me dinner, Liam. It woke me up. For 20 years, I have been living in a gray, hollow world, consumed by my own loss. I built this empire as a monument to my husband and son, but I had forgotten how to live. You reminded me what humanity looks like. You reminded me of the goodness I thought was gone from the world." She then made her romantic declaration, not with flowery words, but with raw, sincere emotion. "I didn't just want to repay you. I wanted to be near the source of that light. I needed to understand it. Watching you, helping you in secret, it started to heal something in me that I thought was shattered forever." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "The connection we felt yesterday when we spoke of our families, that was real. You see the world with a heart that I thought no longer existed." She stood up and walked to her desk, picking up a crisp, official-looking document. "This isn't charity, Liam. This is an investment in a good man." She handed it to him. It was a job offer, not as a janitor, but as the head of a new charitable foundation she was establishing, the Lily and Thomas Foundation, dedicated to helping families struggling with medical debt. The salary was astronomical. The position came with a beautiful, fully furnished house in a quiet, safe neighborhood near the best schools. It was a complete and total salvation, a solution to every single one of his problems. "I can't accept this," Liam stammered, overwhelmed. "It's too much. It's not enough," Serafina countered softly, kneeling in front of him. "You saved my soul, Liam. Let me help you mend your life. Let us help each other. Let us build something beautiful from our shared pain." In that moment, surrounded by the symbols of her immense wealth, all Liam could see was the raw vulnerability in her eyes. He saw a fellow traveler in grief, a woman who understood his deepest pain. Hope, bright and undeniable, bloomed in his chest. He nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He was safe. His daughter was safe. They were going to be okay. 1 year later, the relentless hammering of rain had been replaced by the soft hush of a perfect summer morning. Golden sunlight streamed through the large bay windows of a stately but warm home, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Liam stood in a bright, modern kitchen, a quiet, happy smile on his face as he flipped pancakes. He wore a soft cashmere sweater, a gift from Serafina, a world away from his old threadbare coat. The hollow, haunted look in his eyes was a distant memory, replaced by a steady, unwavering light of peace and contentment. A peal of laughter echoed from the backyard. He looked out the window to see Lily, now a healthy, vibrant 8-year-old, chasing butterflies across a lush green lawn. Her laughter was the sweetest sound in the world. She wore a simple summer dress, but on her wrist was a delicate silver charm bracelet, a birthday gift from Serafina. Serafina herself was sitting on the porch steps, watching Lily with a look of pure, unadulterated joy. The deep, ingrained sadness had finally lifted from her features, leaving behind a serene and tender beauty. She caught Liam's eye and her smile deepened. He brought 2 mugs of tea out to the porch and sat beside her. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a simple, comfortable gesture that spoke of a deep and abiding love. They had spent the last year building a new life, a new family, from the ashes of their old ones. The Lily and Thomas Foundation had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of families, with Liam at its helm, his gentle nature and deep empathy making him a brilliant and compassionate leader. Serafina, in turn, had rediscovered the joy in her life, not through her wealth, but through the simple, profound love of a good man and a little girl who called her Sarah. They rarely spoke of that day in the store, but it was the unspoken foundation upon which their entire world was built. It was a sacred memory. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "I was just thinking about a rainy day," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And a woman who dropped her groceries," she squeezed his hand. "I was thinking about a man who taught a billionaire the meaning of wealth." Lily ran up to them, her face bright, holding up a small, colorful wildflower. "For you, Sarah," she said, placing it carefully in Serafina's hand. Serafina's eyes glistened as she accepted the small, perfect gift. They were a family, forged not by blood, but by a single, selfless act of kindness that had rippled outwards, healing 3 shattered hearts and creating a perfect, idyllic life filled with security and love. This story is a testament to the idea that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the compassion we show to one another. It is a fable of kindness and redemption, showing how a single, selfless act can ripple through the universe and change lives in the most miraculous ways. Liam's quiet dignity in the face of unbearable hardship and Serafina's reawakened heart are a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, a flicker of human goodness can reignite the brightest light. If this story touched your heart, and you believe in the power of love and kindness to overcome any obstacle, please let us know. These tales are more than just entertainment. They are a celebration of the human spirit and its incredible capacity for resilience and grace. We invite you to join our community of hopeful hearts by liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need a little inspiration, and subscribing to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring stories that will warm your heart and renew your faith in humanity. We'll see you in the next one.